Hello and welcome to Module 7. After this week and next week, the course will be finished, so we're in the final stages. Um, Something I want to draw your attention to right away is Module 7. The first title here is the editing process, and in actuality, the focus is more on revision. And in this week's announcement, it starts off by reminding students of the difference between revising and editing. That revision is actually re-seeing the creative piece that you're working on and looking at the big picture items first because those are the most important things. And then when you're completely done with revising, looking at big picture items, then and only then will you look at editing concerns like punctuation, grammar, word choices, things like that. And I found, first of all, a really nice description of the difference between revising and editing. And then that's followed by um, two columns. The one on the left are the things that revision looks at, and the one on the right are the things that editing looks at. This is a really good list to review prior to beginning your revisions on the rough draft that you got feedback on last week, because it will help you better focus on the kinds of feedback that you received as well as how you're going to apply that feedback to your revision process. And so before you get started on anything else this week, I encourage you to read the two lists, to think about how they differ, um, and then also be ready to read the rest of the announcement for specifics on the assignments. Okay, so that said, this being the next to the last module for the course, we're accomplishing some big things this week. You're revising your rough draft and submitting it as the final project part 1 for grading. And so the process carries over from last week when you got the opportunity to both give and receive feedback on your rough draft. And so the first thing that you're going to want to do after reviewing the announcement is to go through the feedback that you received. And you might want to go back to module 4 when I gave you a little process to use when you receive feedback so that you have a method to go through the feedback and make use of it, not only for immediate revisions, but also to help you think about your overall writing process. So I would encourage you to go back and review that in the announcements. Also, you're going to think about how to apply the feedback in terms of, and I suggest that you have a plan for revision, that you maybe list the things that that you see need to be revised and then prioritize them. Which ones do I need to do first, and then subsequent order. Maybe even guesstimating how much time it's going to take so that you can do some time management through this week. It's always suggested that you revisit your rough draft more than once. Don't try to do all the revision in one setting because that can be overwhelming. And break it down into parts so that if you have a list where it's prioritized, you can address those things first, get those out of the way, and then move down the list to things that are smaller tasks. So that's the learning objectives for this module. And then, of course, that is followed by the module overview. The document this time isn't as long, but there are still 2 questions, so be sure that you fully read the document and respond to both questions. Then we have the required resources, and this week there is no textbook reading, and what we have is a selection of readings that we have one for each of the 4 genres that you had the opportunity to work on. And they are focused on talking about the writing process, specifically revision. So the first one is actually a side-by-side comparison of this writer's poetry. If you scroll down, it's a little bit, whoops, let's see, let's move the box. It's kind of, depending on what screen you're looking at, it's kind of hard to read. So be sure that you're on a screen big enough that you can actually see the text clearly, because what's on the left is an early draft, and then what's on the right is the final version that was actually published. And so it's very interesting to read both the writer's description of the revision process, which comes above this, as well as looking at the actual text and how it was originally and how it was changed for the final. I find that seeing this kind of example is probably the most helpful aspect of learning about revision. If I can actually see how people have done it and hear about their choices, the reasoning behind why they've made the changes that they have, I find that really helpful. The next one, tips from the masters. This is specifically with a screenplay, and let's see, it's over here on the left. Billy Wilder, I have to move my box again, who's a well-known writer-director, gives some general tips for screenwriting that can be helpful in terms of the process as well as revision. And then the next one is better ways to use reflection in your memoir. So it looks specifically at memoir, and this one also has examples of both how not to do it and then also how to do it if you're writing memoir. I don't believe that in this course anybody was writing that, but even though you're not writing it, the discussion in general about the writing process and the process of revision is helpful regardless of the genre that you're writing on currently. And then finally, Story Club with George Saunders. This is from his Substack called Story Club, and it talks specifically about giving critiques, being a reviewer for the first half, and then the second half is less relevant. And when you get to that, I'll leave it up to you to decide whether or not you want to read the rest of it, because it kind of goes off in a different direction. But the first half is very relevant, and it also George Saunders is a really, I find, a very helpful teacher of writing. And so if you want to explore this page to see any more information about, what he makes available to students of writing. And then the additional support is, again, a poem that has some discussion about the writing process, how it came to be, and then there's a short film that accompanies the reading of this poem by the author. And so it's just kind of interesting to see how an artist developed a film to go along with the poem. But again, for me, it has the text of the poem as well as the reading, which I always find very helpful, because I can't just hear somebody read and really get a whole lot out of it. I want to see how the lines are written, how the breaks are done, how the punctuation is done, etc. So this one offers both of those. So it's worth taking a look at. And again, because there's not a textbook reading this week, there is that should move pretty quickly. Then we move on to the first assignment. I have to move my box again. We have a creative journal called Receiving Criticism. And again, because they're in the process of updating this course, the creative work is not actually something that you're writing that's an original creative work. This time, it's going to be a section of the rough draft that you just finished in Module 5 that you've received feedback on. You're going to pick a paragraph, a stanza, or 10 lines of dialogue or description if you're doing a screenplay, and revise those. You're not going to post the entire rough draft revised. You're going to just do this excerpt. And the assignments are in order for a reason, because this is an opportunity to kind of get started on revision, manage with something manageable, a short part, so you can take that through the process, get a little bit of practice doing that. And then you're going to answer reflection questions that are related to that, what you've just experienced in doing that revision. In this week's announcement, I have gone ahead and given you some specifics about answering the question. Sometimes I think it's helpful to point out to students exactly what it is that is being looked for in the questions. So take a look at that as well as the rest of the announcement, because in bold are the questions that are being asked, and then in not bold, following each question, there's a little bit of information about what it is that you're being expected to turn in as far as the deliverable. And again, remember that the rubrics do not currently match the individual creative journals. So the feedback that you get when I grade those will match. Just a heads up on that. Then we have the big assignment, 7-2 final project, part 1 submission, the creative work. The final project actually has 2 parts. Part 2 will be submitted in Module 8 and is a reflection work rather than continued work on the creative project that you've been doing. So, as always, you'll want to click on Guidelines and Rubric. And this is a long one, but it's important that you go ahead and take the time to read it, because at this stage of the game, you want to remind yourself, what is it I've been doing, and why am I doing it, and what is the culmination of all these different steps that we've been taking. And so the overview discusses that, and then lists the milestones. And this has 3 parts. You've already done milestone 1 in assignment 5-1. That was your rough draft. And then that has been graded and returned to you. So be sure that you review that grading feedback, because I have provided you with both what's working well and what still needs work as part of your revision. And I try to prioritize that, and I try to be as specific as I can. There's both summary comments as well as comments and questions on the turn-in version of your rough draft. Final submission part 1, which is what you're submitting during during Module 7, will be the revised version of your rough draft. This will be graded with the final project part 1 rubric, which is at the end of this document. We'll take a look at that in just a second. And then final submission part 2, as I mentioned, is submitted in Module 8, and it's a writing reflection. As we continue to scroll down through this guidelines and rubric, we have a prompt that is kind of just a summary of what appears as the focus in the grading rubric. And so I encourage you to read this. There's a little bit of repeated information in the rubric, but it's important that you fully understand. And then what to submit. I need to point out again that this information gives you pages, page requirements, where for grading purposes, word counts are used, because for 2 reasons, actually. One, there can be really variable length in terms of pages. If you have 3 to 5 pages of dialogue, that could just be the very beginning of a scene. And so 3 to 5 pages in word count, that's 750 to 1250 words, 250 words per page. Not only is that the more accurate way to determine length requirements, but it's also the industry standard. When you submit to a journal or you're shopping a novel around, they're asking about word counts, not page numbers. And so you need to start right now thinking about length of work in terms of word count rather than page numbers. And so for each of the 4 genres, there are specifics. Fiction, 3 to 5 pages, 750 to 1250 words. Nonfiction, same 3 to 5 pages, 750 to 1250 words. Poetry, a minimum of 3, but no more than 5 poems. They should be single-spaced. All of these should be Times New Roman 12-point font with 1-inch margins all around. And then finally for the screenplay, 5 to 7 pages, which works out to be 1250 to 1750 words. And it's important that you carefully review the sample in Module 5 for a few days more to understand the formatting for a screenplay. It's very specific. It's totally different than for any of the other genres. Finally, supporting materials, there's some definitions that match some of the criteria that are used in the grading rubric. And so it's important that you understand the definitions because while there are descriptives given of the categories and the rankings, they sometimes need a little bit of additional definition. So do review those. And as always, I suggest that you read the exemplary and the proficient to determine what it is what it is you're trying to accomplish in the final project, the revised version of your rough draft. The same categories as were used for the rough draft, but now there's an exemplary category, which assumes the student going above and beyond proficient in each of the criteria in order to earn the exemplary rating. So it's important for me to explain that the grade that you got on your rough draft may not necessarily be the range of grade that you receive or that you earn on your final project. That's because of the addition of the exemplary category, so the points are changed. It's also that the expectations are higher because this is a revised work. And so the expectations are higher in terms of you've had a chance now to get feedback, to apply that feedback, to do revisions in order to make the work more effective. And as a result, the expectations are higher, the bar is higher. So to receive the same grade that you did on the rough draft, you would have to demonstrate higher proficiency than you did in the rough draft rubric. All right, I believe that's everything for Module 8. Just a reminder that you can continue to ask questions in the general questions discussion till the end of the course. I review that frequently. I'm notified by email anytime anybody posts in there. And if you have a question that's not a personal question or a grading question, I encourage you to post in the general questions discussion because often it's a question that somebody else has. And this is the best way to disseminate that information to the whole class rather than to individual students. So you're helping out others when you do that.